set of tools to average this data in new and different ways that no statistician on this planet has ever seen before. And there's a lot of questionable things. And McIntyre and McKittrick, one of the things they did is they put white noise, just random data into Michael Mann's statistical methods, and they got hockey sticks. So I'm not going to go into a lot. There's a lot of statistical questions with it. And I'm going to skip back. I'm just going to show you one example just to give you an idea of why I don't have a lot of respect for these particular analyses. This is a series of lake sediments in Finland. And the lake sediments, the way it works as a proxy, and I always laugh because climate alarmists always say that rising temperatures is going to destroy life on this planet, but whenever they do a proxy, whenever they look at history, they always assume that higher temperatures means more life. And so they have sort of an opposite point of view. In this case, the more organic matter they find in the sediment layer, the hotter they felt like that area was. And so organic matter is lower density. But basically, just trust me, based on their proxy analysis, the higher this is here, the lower the X-ray density, the higher this is, the more organic matter, and therefore the hotter it must have been. So they found a medieval warm period. They found a little bit of a cool period, but not a lot. It's not a real good proxy. And then they found this that says, oh, there's been a bunch of global cooling. But they said, no, there's not really. This is just man has come in and they disturbed the lake bottom because they've done agriculture around it and they've cleared the forests and they've done construction. And basically this is just bad data, so you should throw it out. Well, Michael Mann came along in his newest study and he did two things. He went ahead and used this data and he flipped the chart upside down. So now this chart says that there was a medieval cool period and that there's warming there, which is all based on bad data. And he actually used that. He used that 4 times. He used that chart, four versions of it in his new hockey stick. If you take that chart out and some other questionable trees in Southern California, which everybody criticizes, you get, believe it or not, no hockey stick. Just taking those few out, you get a medieval warm period, you get a little ice age, and you get temperatures now that aren't that much different. So really, the story of all these hockey sticks is a statistical method that takes a few known proxy series that drive hockey sticks to create hockey sticks, because that's what they want to make. A couple guys that didn't seek to create a hockey stick, Moberg is actually a climate alarmist. Lowell is actually a guy that helped me with this presentation. He's actually a skeptic. They both have not used different proxies that they felt were better proxies, and lo and behold, we come right back to where we started. We get a medieval warm period around 1000, we get a little ice age here, and we get temperatures today that aren't any different or substantially lower than they were in the Middle Ages. So we're right back to where we were 20 years ago after this little diversion through the hockey stick. And there's actually some guys in town, the ITSO family, that have a study for the Center for Study of Carbon Dioxide and Global Change, and they actually they're over Mesa, and they actually take each of these series that they get, and they just say, does it show the medieval warm period warmer than today, or do they show today warmer than the Middle Ages? And the vast bulk of the proxies that have come out in peer-reviewed studies all show that the Middle Ages are still warmer than even where we are today, by over a degree Fahrenheit on average. So, that's all I want to talk about proxies. That's 2 down. Third thing, most important, this is the main argument now in the IPCC. And this is crazy, and you're going to think that I'm portraying this wrong. So I'm really going to try to be fair to this, but I'm not even sure there's a way to do it. What they did is they took their models, which they know to be wrong and simplistic. They took their models and ran it against the last 50 years of history. And the models couldn't duplicate the last 50 years of history. And so they said, because the models can't duplicate the last 50 years of history using only natural factors, then it must be CO2. It couldn't have been anything by nature. In other words, what they said is, because we can't think of anything natural that caused the warming over the last 50 years, it must be man-made. It's almost like the Greeks not knowing how the sun goes across the sky and positing Apollo with a chariot. Well, this is Apollo, CO2 is Apollo with his chariot. We can't really explain it, so we're just going to assume that it's Apollo and his CO2 chariot causing this. And as Linson said, he's a professor at MIT, he said, what he said specifically, I'm going to read this, is what was done was to take a large number of models that could not reasonably simulate known patterns of natural behavior, and he lists a bunch of ocean oscillations. But then they claim such models nonetheless accurately depict natural internal climate variability, even when they admit they don't include all these factors. And then use that fact that these models could not replicate the warming episode from the mid-70s through the mid-90s to argue that forcing, that means some kind of other effect, some other warming effect, was necessary, and the forcing must have been due to man. I'm going to this is a pictorial view of what they did. They ran the black is very smooth. The temperature, like 6/10 of a degree over the last day. They get 8/10 because they ended at that peak in 1998. But anyway, so there's smooth temperature. They said we ran the models, and they said that nature would do that. And so we had to do CO2, and when we put CO2 in the models, it was this. But it's just whatever assumptions they have. It's their assumptions about nature. It's their assumptions about CO2. This is craziness. I don't know if any of y'all are financial modelers. If y'all tried to actually bet your money on this kind of certainty about your financial models and try to model like the economy or something complex, you know, you'd be bankrupt by tomorrow. I guess a lot of people are right now, so that's my point. Okay, but what they're basically saying is that this time period, because there wasn't much CO2 over here. This time period in the circle, really they're talking about since 1950, but it was pretty flat in here. So really this run-up right here, they're saying, can't be explained by any natural effects. It has to be man-made. I'm going to show you 4 or 5 tests. One test for that and 4 reasons why it could be something else, okay? And then I'm going to let you take a break. First one, I have taken that chart, I have not changed the scale, I just cut and pasted. These two are the same scale, both X and Y, they're right from that chart, same data. One of them is from 1895 to 1946, which is the period the IPCC says has to be nature only. The other one is from the period from 1957 to 2008, which is the period that the IPCC says can't be nature, it has to be man. Okay, so one of these has to be nature only. One of these can't be explained by nature. They're the same scale. Okay, so that doesn't prove anything, but it's okay. I'll tell you right now, it's okay as an amateur to use your common sense on this stuff. Okay, and you know, I just am amazed by that. But anyway, we're going to move on to real proof. I'm going to offer you 4 things that through peer-reviewed literature could have caused the 4/10, 5/10 of warming we've seen since 1950. And I'm not saying they did. I'm not saying they're the only things. I think they all interact together. It's incredibly complex. But I'm going to show you at least 4 things that could have caused it to give the lie to the fact that it could only have been man-made CO2. Okay? It could have partially been man-made CO2. I've never denied that. Okay, the first thing is land use. We've already talked about land use. Remember my son in the SUV going around Phoenix. Phoenix had 6, 8, 10 degrees warmer than the outlying country. You have the same thing when we tear out a forest, when we build a vineyard, when we clear land, when we build a suburb, when we build a mall, when we fill a swamp. All of those things have effects on temperatures, big effects. We're learning more and more. And in fact, almost all of them cause the temperatures to be higher rather than lower. Almost any change in the natural environment tends to bias the temperatures higher. And so what these guys just found in a peer-reviewed study this year was that, at least in the United States, that the warming since 1950 could be completely explained by land use changes. May not just be land use changes, maybe it and other factors. But the land use changes cause enough increase in temperature to completely explain the warming. So that's one alternate cause. Here's number 2. Recovery from the Little Ice Age. We talked about the Little Ice Age, but one thing I didn't tell you is give you a sense of scale for it, because I'm kind of amazed at this. This is back, remember that ice core analysis that Al Gore showed over 600,000 years? We're zooming in on just the last 5,000 years, but this is ice core data too. So here we are today. Here's the medieval warm period. Here's the Little Ice Age. Here's a couple other warm periods. A couple of things you can see is one is you see almost exactly a monotonic 1,000-year warm period cycle. So we're, to some extent, this is entirely predictable by history. But the second thing I will tell you is look at the Little Ice Age and look all the way across here. The period of time in the 1600s and 1700s, and I won't make a definitive statement, but may have been the coldest period that man's experiences became civilized back thousands, back in Babylon, thousands of years BC. This may be the coldest experience that civilized man has ever experienced. When did we invent the thermometer? About 1750-ish, 1760. We invented the thermometer and started taking air temperatures at the exact lowest point of temperatures over the last 5,000 years. So, if somebody was to make a reasonable assumption, if I just started on the blue and been at this temperature, I'm going to assume the climate's about at its average. That's what you would normally assume. But in fact, we started measuring at the absolute low point. So to some extent, our perceptions are skewed because a lot of this warming has been recovering from one of the coldest periods that civilized man has ever experienced. So you have this recovery from the little ice age, and we're going to see that more later after the break when we talk about glaciers. You're going to see that in spades with glaciers. Third is the sun. It is